Hello, everyone. So this is Martin. Today it is March 15th, so I'm late with this course. I've said before that I'm trying to catch up by the end of the month. The last video was supposed to be March 1st, but I'm trying to catch up on a few different things. I've been lucky enough to get a guest today, Sohrab, and he speaks a little bit of French, but we're going to go mostly in English. So we're going to start with him introducing himself a little bit, and he'll include an introduction a little bit here or there in French sometimes too. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sohrab. I'm a director of business development at SkyCool Systems Incorporated. We are an early stage startup focused on improving the energy efficiency of buildings and heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems in buildings, refrigeration systems at grocery stores and supermarkets. And I am a director of business development, and I work on business development for one of our projects, which is one of our products that is used for passive cooling. So we apply this material onto roofs of buildings, roofs of warehouses, distribution centers, as a way to provide passive cooling, which is cooling without using any electricity and without emitting any greenhouse gases. I have a background in mechanical engineering. I can maybe speak a little bit in French about it. J'ai étudié l'ingénierie mécanique quand j'étais à l'université, et à cette époque, l'énergie m'intéressait beaucoup. J'ai beaucoup appris à l'université de les problèmes de notre société avec l'énergie et la durabilité. Et j'ai voulu apprendre quelque chose et faire quelque chose dans l'industrie. Et pour cette raison, j'ai décidé de travailler un peu à Honeywell Aerospace. Et j'étais ingénieur là-bas et j'ai travaillé sur un moteur d'hélicoptère et j'ai fait beaucoup j'ai travaillé avec des logiciels pour analyser les mécaniques de fluide dans un moteur d'hélicoptère. Donc, oui, je m'intéresse beaucoup dans les systèmes énergiques et j'essaie de rendre ces systèmes plus efficaces. And yeah, happy to chat a little bit more about what I do and answer any questions about the technology.
Hey, that was pretty awesome. I pretty much understood everything you said there. I'll repeat a little bit in English that one of the things you did in energy systems was to kind of study the fluid dynamics using software within helicopter engines. Is that accurate? Yeah, that's
Absolutely,
cool.
yes.
Yeah,
we used computational fluid dynamics.
Cool, thank you. So we talked about a couple of questions before because we don't have a lot of time, and the questions were related to the first one I had is I was going to say how I heard of your company, which was I was watching a Just Have a Think video. It's an educational YouTube channel. And he mentioned quickly a paper from the scientist that is at the origin of the product that you're selling. And then I tracked down a TED talk, and then I sent a message asking for one of the scientists that were not available now, but to actually kind of play a part in this ecocentric worldview. And I defined a little bit more to you here what that meant. So I had a few ideas for questions, just these two, and we're going to stick to those ones, but we can talk about whatever else it might deviate us from. One of them is, well, one thing I think I actually said in another video is let's say we invent a straw, let's say that can purify, let's say a salt water that it's safe to drink. For me, I talked about we'd still be faced with the issue of distribution. So let's say for me in this what if scenario, because I haven't really spent a lot of time on this and I don't know if I'd ever succeed, but what if I came up with an idea for, let's say, a wheel that keeps turning using scientific principles that we understand and keeps generating energy? What would be my goal for, let's say, releasing this idea? Because a lot of what I talk about in my project is that our species is not, I say pretty much since we got fire going, I've been using the concept of technology without responsibility. I mean, we've been having a good time with these opposable thumbs, but we haven't really been thinking wisely or in the long term or with sentience for the rest of the biosphere, let's say. So for me, I would not want to release this technology. And one of the reasons is, for example, it wouldn't go to everybody. And the reasons that I would release it would have criteria. For example, I would want some of the material for this machine to not be using new materials mined, but let's say breaking down weapons, let's say, and using the materials that was already in them, all sorts of things like this. But like when I watched the video, Just Have a Think, and then you guys came up as an idea, I was scared because I had an idea about how to release a lot of the heat in the atmosphere in a particular way that is very, very simple. It's not a money-making thing. And again, I'd be afraid somebody has that idea someday, because then it would mean business as usual on steroids. So for me, I need to see our species kind of grow up a little bit for certain things. What's your opinion about this? Like how, let's say, new technology that would be making something significantly more efficient, or use much less energy, or create less of the gases that contribute to greenhouse. What is your opinion? Like collectively speaking, the biosphere, our species, in this way. Like for me, I wouldn't want to release my idea at this time, because if I study our own human nature, we're just going to use it to weaponize it again, right? What's your opinion about this?
I think you bring up a very good point. So it's a complicated question. I think definitely with a technology like that, you could do a lot of good, and you could also possibly do a lot of bad. The good, I think, is that you could, provide essential things to people who sorely need it, such as electricity, and in places that don't have it, and that can be used for anything from water purification to internet access, to development and construction. And that would be fantastic, and it would lift so many people out of poverty. So at that level, you would feel that you almost had a moral obligation to release it. But then, with energy being free, you can imagine that people would want to deploy it everywhere and keep expanding and create more cities, and really, destroy the biosphere in many ways. And that is
Accelerate the
something that would
Anthropocene. Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely, yes. And so we would want to be very, very careful about that. And a weaponization is also something that that could definitely be a byproduct. So I think you have to ask yourself, how can you make this technology available yet contain it in a way similar to what we've done with nuclear energy? And it's very, very dangerous sort of thing to play with, but many countries are able to use it peacefully, and generate energy that is basically CO2 free. Of course, that you have to deal with the waste problem and things like that. So that's all something that you would have to figure out before you released a technology like that on the large scale. Something very powerful that has the ability to do great things, but could possibly be misused.
Your answer made me think of a few things. Like, for example, when you brought up nuclear power, like you hinted that, yes, we didn't necessarily think in the long term. Let's say the radioactive waste, or even the accidents, or even training people that we never run out of experts to fix things, let's say, or have plan B, plan C, plan D, because that's the kind of technology you need many types of levels of security. But I thought at first when you said, the new technology being used for people, let's say, that are in poverty, I thought you were going with the argument that is more understood more and more in the mainstream now, which is to release it more to the global south before, if ever, to the global north, as a way to compensate. Because I would think that's a good idea. But again, like, let's say we decide this with oil. Is it happening with oil? Well, if it's not happening with oil, it's not likely to be happening with new technology, to be focusing on, the countries that we would call developing countries. What's your opinion? Like, do you think that's a good idea to release it there first, which of course is not great profit at the beginning, if scientists wanted to kind of benefit in this way from their inventions? What's your opinion on that?
That's a very good point, and I think you'd have to be very careful because once you release that kind of technology, people from everywhere are going to want to come and inspect it, try to take it apart, try to learn about it. There will be corruption as well. The trade secrets could be shared with anybody, but I do think that the developing world is currently in the process of greatly expanding its energy use, using more and more energy to provide development and lift people out of poverty, which I think is great. But the environmental implications of that is something that's extremely important. And we're looking at countries, China as well, which is burning a lot of coal, and India, where I'm from, which is rapidly growing. So we need to be very, very careful about the economic implications of that. And so I think providing the technology to these growing economies would be extremely important, because that's where it's needed the most, where people really need development. And it's also, the best way to mitigate some of the environmentally disastrous consequences associated with rapid development and burning of fossil fuels. So you would have to release it first in developing countries, but you would also have to be careful of corruption, the technology being misused by actors in those countries, and of course the temptation to sell rights of the technology to countries that shouldn't be using it right away until we figured out the best way to control it.
Yeah, I think I don't know if we can call it industrial espionage, but I don't think we're anywhere near a time of history for any culture to really stop doing that. So for me, again, I'd have to see the tipping point in our social structures change before applying this. Do you know Greta, I assume? Okay. One thing that even she doesn't talk about, that's really at the root. I mean, Isaac Asimov, you might know him. He mentioned this a long time ago, and he passed away in 1992. And he said the biggest environmental threat is the overpopulation of our species. So nobody talks about this, and we always want to continue this. And some of the arguments are the more babies we have, more will come with a miracle solution, as if billions is not enough. It's like a business as usual kind of poorly made argument. But what I wanted to say is that some of the things I talk about in my own videos that are not necessarily linked to ecocentric worldview is the first form of technology that we never really developed. And that is human thinking tools. And if we would have really evolved sentience and sapience, then we wouldn't be having even this conversation, because we wouldn't be having the same issues. And we know kind of, for example, if I don't see, like, for me, like a real change of dialogue all around the world, and again, that would take miracles, or the threat of extraterrestrials saying, we're about to kick you guys out because that's pretty nasty stuff you're doing to this unique globe, is I would think maybe one of the ideas that would convince me to release such technology would be like if everybody in the north moved to the south and everybody in the south moved to the north, like if there must be a shift really in how we start caring about each other. And again, I don't see that. Did you have anything else to say? Because otherwise we can move on to question 2.
I think that's a very important thought. I think definitely we need to change the way we think, our thought processes, and the way we tackle challenges like these as a species, because it's going to be very, very important in the years to come. But yeah, that's all that I would have to say on that.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we can trust, like the United Nations to have the infrastructure or logistics to make sure things would be used wisely and fairly, because it can't succeed now at even like basic things. So looking for the other question. What was it again? Is oh yeah, on your resume is sustainability manager. That's your title in the company where you are now, or it's something from the past you did, or?
It's something from the past, yes. It was when I was working in India at a chemicals manufacturer, and I was looking a lot at ways to improve sustainability in the factories, reduce energy consumption, to reduce costs, and move us closer to our net zero goals. And happy to chat a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, and for me, what I still find that is confusing, although I don't think it's confusing for me, but there's actually a lot of literature written about this, about how the term sustainability is used. And for me, I've talked about this in some of these videos on ecocentric worldviews, because, for example, our species thinks we invented the concept of sustainability when sustainability is related to system science. And we can even apply it globally like the biosphere. And of course, that means it existed before our species, the concept of sustainability. So sometimes I have to say, oh, you're not talking about sustainability. You're talking about sustainable methods, behaviors, practices, approaches embedded in one species' way of doing things, just our own. So for me, I always want to clarify this. And have you ever been in conversations where you can tell, let's say somebody's using the word sustainability or sustainable something, like sustainable practices or outcomes, but it's still not necessarily a resilient, stable system. It's just something a little bit better than it was before, from us breaking it, but not from, let's say, what evolution did over time, let's say with climate, let's say before we screwed it up. So what's your opinion related to using these terms?
Yes, I think the term can be used in many different ways. I think greenwashing is definitely something that you start to see a lot of companies do, because there's a lot of incentive to portray the image that you're doing something sustainable, or you're doing something that's good for the environment. But I think that every single step is important. Using less coal and natural gas is extremely important, even if you're still polluting. Every single change has to be rewarded. A company like Shell or Exxon can probably make a much greater impact if they clean up their processes than a company like Tesla can. So so I think that it is important to stress the importance of making changes. But yes, I think that large corporations are often very guilty of using the term to their advantage, and to gain credibility from consumers, and gain publicity. But I think that every single change in a positive direction is important, and should be celebrated.
Thank you. Yeah, and large corporations, if they're large, necessarily their priority was not really sustainability, it was profit. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been that large. So for me, like, I had a driving school, just one car, just me, kept quality, but expanding, franchising, getting bigger loses quality, and quality is a flaw that we're not pursuing as a species. Now you have the specialty a little bit of buildings, right? Building material, how to make buildings and their use of energy more efficient. So an idea related to what we just talked about, for example, is, let's say we make a building more efficient in energy consumption, but we find the materials that were used to do that had, in all their interconnections in social systems, like, was there child labor? Was there transportation costs using petroleum? How did it, in a sustainability way, which means you have to incorporate all the interconnections in the system of our social species, but also of the, geological, ecological, climate impacts. And this is when, yeah, I mean, I don't know what somebody from a company would say. Hey, what do you want from us? We have our shareholders and we try to do something here, and you're saying it's bad. And of course, they can't argue with the data that it's bad. But again, this is when we're starting to approach the difference between using the word sustainable something and the concept of sustainability, which is system science. So in a way, like, I don't know if I've ever heard anybody use the word sustainability properly, because if they did, again, they'd say, we gotta not have people come to be born and then die. We have to kind of control our own numbers until we figure out why we haven't been working on the first form of technology. Any thoughts about that?
Absolutely. I think that we definitely have to change people's mindset. We definitely have to be a little bit more careful about the terms that we use. I think that when I think of environmental, social, and governance, I think that's very important. I think it's a lot more than than just having diversity on your board. You know, there has to be diversity in the whole organization. There has to be a lot more than greenwashing to boost public image. It really has to have a meaningful impact on reducing carbon emissions. And like you said, you know, sustainability has been around for a while. It has done great before we came into the picture, and it's us who is really causing the problem over here. So we have to take responsibility, and we have to restore things to the way they were, or as close to the way they were as possible. And that means reducing deforestation to boost palm oil production. It means protecting our biosphere and you know, indigenous species. So all of that has to be taken care of, and sustainability shouldn't be a buzzword that corporations use. It should really be ingrained in the fabric of our society, and it should be the only way that we think, not just an alternative that is exciting and you know, boosts public opinion, but really it should be our only way of doing business.
Yeah, and it should be something that should always be allowed to be challenged and debated publicly. And of course, sustainability must involve care and concern for future generations. Now, of course, if we're eco-centric, that would not just be our own species. Because I mean, in a way, if we do that, we'd eventually just be living in efficient cities. There wouldn't be a natural world anymore. We'd be kind of, you know, our food would be artificial pretty much. And eventually that's when people say, no, I'm tired of this. So yeah, I mean, even making a space station extremely efficient and making a lot, let's say, we still don't realize psychologically that's an evolutionary dead end. It would eventually kill our species to be in an environment, even if the temperature is regulated and gravity and there's ways to kind of exercise. We just didn't evolve there, right? And it would take, you know, thousands of years for us to kind of even be a species that doesn't want to kill itself being out there for too long, really. So, hey, this is kind of cool. So thank you very much. I don't know if there's anything you want to have for final words, and then I'll close it off. And
maybe this is where I can go back into French. C'était un grand plaisir de parler avec vous. C'était très intéressant, et j'espère que tous les gens qui voient cette émission pensent un peu à ce qu'ils peuvent faire, ce qu'ils peuvent faire pour notre environnement et notre planète. Car ça, c'est très important. Et nous avons tous une obligation de faire de nos mieux et améliorer la situation. Et j'espère que vous pouvez faire ça avec moi. Merci.
J'ai aimé la façon que tu as terminé tes phrases, parce que tu disais que nous tous, and that's right, we don't point the finger at anybody as a villain, parce que dans mes propres vidéos, je dis tout le temps que dans toutes les proto-civilisations qui sont effondrées, les vilains, c'était vraiment la majorité, la norme, qui ont permis des choses d'accélérer ou d'empirer à des niveaux que, tu sais, avaient même peur pour leur vie et la vie de leur famille. C'est ça. Moi, mon français vient du Québec, comme je t'ai dit, puis j'ai critiqué le premier du Québec qui avait dit aux nouvelles au début de COVID that we did not have a French word for accountability when we do. Je te donne un petit peu un devoir. Tu me donneras un courriel si tu trouves le mot en français de accountability, which exists. Mais c'est très rare, c'est plus les gens francophones de la France qui vont avoir la bonne réponse. Mais je dirais que plus que 9 sur 10 des Québécois trouveront pas le mot ou iront pas chercher, faire l'effort de trouver le mot, which again proves there's a lack of accountability. Ça, c'est des mots-clés de civilisation. Je te félicite de parler plus qu'une langue. Puis ce mot-là, si tu le trouves en français, s'il vous plaît, garde-les. Puis trouve des bonnes définitions qui sont des paragraphes des fois. Ce n'est pas un terme qui donne une définition de 3-4 mots. It's a key civilization term. Fait que je ne sais pas si dans ton langage, toi en Inde, il y a un équivalent. Si oui, tu me le diras, parce que je pense que eventually we could probably chart that a society, or I would say proto-society that uses language, if they don't have a word for accountability and they don't use it often in the right ways by the majority of the population, I think probably there's a correlation between their successes and failures as a proto-society. Ben, je te remercie beaucoup. Puis, tu t'es bien adapté. C'est la première fois qu'on se parle sur Zoom. So thank you very much for your time. And I'm hoping
Thank
this
you.
recording went well. And then follow up with me and I'll follow up with you that it went well. And if you find that French word, let me know. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. I mean, thanks very much. It was a pleasure. And to my knowledge, that word is responsabilité. But I mean, that's how I think about it. And
I'll
we
give you
all
a
have a
clue.
responsibility.
I'll give
I
you a
think.
clue. It starts with the same letter, but it's a totally different word. So don't answer now. Just let me know later, because it is actually not easy to find the right word, but it exists and it is a powerful word. And when you find it, then I think you'll be more sure that if you have a language equivalence for your own culture, that it'll be the right one as well. Because if you give me responsabilité or responsibility in your own language, it won't be the word accountability. So look it up. OK, merci beaucoup.
Very interesting.
J'arrête l'enregistrement. OK, bye-bye.
Avec plaisir.